good onboarding. They think it lasts about 3 months. But with SaaS, it's actually pushed out to about 5.7 months is the traditional onboarding at the moment. There is a 40% increase in that time for more complex sales.
In this episode, we break down why most sales onboarding programs fail and what's actually costing your business every time a new rep doesn't ramp.
To replace, say, a rep, it's around about 100 grand. And then you think about that ramp, all of these invisible costs add up.
If you're a smaller business, if you don't do that and you don't give them the time, then what happens is that individual will start to build certain habits, potentially bad habits. Yep. Then you're trying to remanage them, and this is where things go south.
If you're hiring salespeople and wondering why they're not ramping fast enough, this conversation is for you. Welcome to the Revenue Leaders Podcast.
All right, so in this episode, we're going to talk about onboarding. Most companies think they've got a really good onboarding process. Come in, meet the team, have lunch, and here's your shit, and away you go. But what does the data actually tell us, Riggs?
It's funny. You think almost as like, oh, sellers can come in. Here's a list of your features. Go for it. What we're seeing at the moment, and this is across a lot of companies, they think that they've got a good onboarding. And they think it lasts about 3 months. But with SaaS, it's actually pushed out to about 5.7 months is the traditional onboarding at the moment. There is a 40% increase in that time for more complex sales. So outside of SaaS, you think, for our clients, professional services, you think financial services, manufacturing, anything that's like highly complex is 40% longer than that. Now, I'm not a mathematician, so I'm not going to figure out how many months that is. But with that, we then see that if people think it's 3 months and it's actually double that, just imagine what the cost of that is to businesses because they're not ramping their salespeople correctly and over a period of time that works best for the customer and the seller.
It's interesting. I think about sales onboarding or onboarding in general. A gentleman called Mark Reverge, who was founding CRO at HubSpot, author of the Sales Acceleration Formula. And I love, the stuff that he talks about. And I think what often gets missed in onboarding is the importance of the coachability component is trying to, during the recruitment, we often talk about onboarding, but onboarding is affected by recruitment, right? And doing the coachability assessment in the interview stage to have a bit of a idea that this person is coachable, but then also baking into the onboarding is what do you do when you see red flags early stages of their onboarding, right? And that's something that Mark would talk about and say, hey, if he saw certain red flags in the first 2 weeks.
Well, what would you say is a couple of red flags just from your world?
We're seeing it now with one of our clients, just the lack of taking on board feedback. Again, that's that coachability, right? Giving feedback early, them applying it. And yes, people learn at they can learn at different stages. Like the pace of learning is different between different people. But there are some, red flags around ability to adhere to sales process or adhere to a process, their ability to actually take on board feedback and make adjustments and multiple times, especially on some basic stuff, right?
There is a question, or there's 2 questions that I ask, and the way that I've seen people answer this question or questions actually shows me like 3 months down the line how amazing they are or if they underperform. The questions I ask are, what research did you do to prepare for this meeting? And then the other question is, what did you learn that you didn't know before?
Oh, that's pretty good, actually.
And I swear to you.
This is for hiring someone.
And the people that can answer that, like I've had some astounding answers, and 2 of which are 2 of my highest performers in the team. And what I've found is they went away and did deep learning and they actually were able to take that information and then make it a concise, conclusion of what they were going after. Now, if you have that they have the agency to go out, find out that information, to problem solve on something that they don't know, that they're putting themselves in a position where it's going to be uncomfortable and they're a little nervous, to then be able to make a conclusion. That is the biggest winner. So I completely agree. It does start very, very early on.
I've got one for like a red flag during onboarding, right? If I'm hiring what I believe to be an A player during onboarding, I would expect them
to be doing their own active research on whatever it is they're coming on board for. I'll just put a sample scenario. We're hiring a customer success person within Coachpilot. I'd expect them to not wait for Louis, Regan, or me to give them a customer to look at or to look at dashboards or whatever they have access to. I would expect an A player to be doing their own discovery and then coming to us and asking questions and going, hey, I found this out. Not waiting to say, okay, what's my next task to do? Like, be hungry. In your
but
role.
I think not everyone shares that same level of proactiveness.
No, that's right.
So
but that would be a red flag for me,
100%.
right?
But I think that's the key, like from an onboarding perspective. I think you're looking to hire certain behaviors and you're looking to hire certain characteristics. I think especially in selling, one of the things that I love about selling is I've never really hired sellers based on sales acumen. So what do I mean by that? If you don't have, if you're completely green, for example, but you've got the right mindset. And Ra, if you're listening to this episode, because he was the guy that came to me, never had any sales experience, but the way he showed up in the interview was incredible, right? You could feel his enthusiasm, you could feel his energy, and you could feel his thirst to learn. We hired him based on those characteristics. And then he was able to become the best performer in the business because of that. So I think selling is one of those roles, again, depending on what you're hiring. Right? If you're hiring someone that's more seasoned, going to manage your complex deals, that's a little bit different. But there's characteristics, behaviors, and then when you start to onboard, it's about saying, well, what's the plan to get this person? And this is why I think the onboarding plan needs to be specific to the type of people you're hiring.
I mean, first of all, with that, you both don't realize it, but you actually said the same thing. The characteristic and the word you're looking for that actually exists, Louis, is agency. It is a thing. It is agency for your situation and yours. I do agree though. The piece with that though is you also need to give that infrastructure to be able to set them up. And this is where I'd love to deep dive with the two of you. We've probably all got different opinions. Onboarding, what should it start with? Features, sales process. What do you guys think?
It needs to start with what I believe is the mission of the company, why the company exists. They need to be brought on that they believe what they're working on. If they're just looking for a job and the attitude and that you're going to get. So they need to understand the goals of the company, why the company exists, who we serve, all those sort of top level things that everyone in the company should be aware of, right? Yeah. Then you can go deeper into their roles and functions. If they're on product, obviously they need to know the product inside and out and play with it. But they need to understand who we're serving, why they care, why they buy.
What our values are.
So they can live by them. Look, all those top level things that, you sort of take for granted because, we work and we live it day by day. And then as someone comes through, they just read it and then assume.
But that's where you got to make sure there's a fit, right? Like we're trying to, during interview stage, you're going, how would they fit?
It's like you're trying to date someone and then 100%. Go, okay, now we're going to get married after a 1 hour conversation.
Yeah. And that's why I think, hence the onboarding, get them aligned. But for me, after the values, culture, etc., it is absolutely learn the customer that we're serving. And I think so many onboarding programs sometimes miss that. They go straight to this is what we do as a company.
Yeah.
These are the products, services we offer, like all that stuff. This is the intricacy of the product. But for me, it's about the people that we serve. That's the first and foremost. People we serve, the use cases that make it relevant for us and the problems we help solve. Because if the onboarding starts on the customer, it's a very customer-centric model. Then everything else is a waterfall off that, right?
Yeah, and this is what Challenger is, right? And this was a big part of Challenger is that you need to start with the customer.
Yeah.
And the flip side to it, if you start with the product, all that you're doing is flogging features at the person across the table. Whereas if you are having, discussions with the customer or going through old transcripts or, looking through proposals, or like really immersing yourself in all of the things customer-based, it's then if you can get that problem, like understanding of problems and pain points that you're solving first. Yeah. Because then it's always more about the questions that you're asking, what are things you need to look out for, what cues, what triggers, all of that sort of stuff. And it almost like alleviates this pressure. The fundamental thing that I saw at Westpac even is that the people that were really, really good at selling were first and foremost, they were actually working with the customers day in, day out, and then they moved to selling. And because that to me was like they understood those pain points so well that they could go and then converse to others.
But that's what I don't mind. And I'm not going to say like get building a competency matrix, but I don't mind the model of having just some key skills that we believe, hey, these are the skills that you need to become competent at over a period of time, and actually measuring that. Say like probably whether it's 5, 6, 7, 8. But just determine that as part of your onboarding process, determine what are the things that we want them to sort of be competent at, be very confident at, and measuring that and having just an ability to measure their competency against that and make that part of your onboarding, right? And we talk about teachbacks. You know, Katie Schwick from Stripe, one of the things that I learned and I loved about her Sales Development Academy was building in a teachback. So when people went through the program, they had to teach elements of the program to others. And it allowed them to really demonstrate competency and capability because they're teaching others on a topic, right? So I think any successful onboarding program should capture the key skills that you want your people to be executing on and grade the level of competence. And it's okay if some take a bit longer than others, but as long as they've got the will, they can develop the skill, right? So it's about building that out. And then building some content that's going to support them. And then once they've gone through that onboarding, what's the continual learning loop, right, that they need to go through? Because sales excellence doesn't come from doing a course once or doing a program once. It comes from that continual learning, right, and getting better and better. Pardon the interruption. I'm Luigi, one of the co-hosts here at Revenue Leaders. You'll notice we don't run sponsors or ads on Revenue Leaders.
This show is free. Our goal is to help you grow revenue and build your sales system that you can rely on. We do have a favour to ask though.
If this episode gives you one clear idea that you can use, do these 2 things. First, share it with one person, a founder, a revenue leader, or a rep who wants to grow their business. Just one. That's how the show grows.
Second, grab free access to our vault over at coachpilot.com/vault. Inside, you'll get the frameworks, templates, and short courses we use with clients to help them scale pipeline and increase win rates.
So the deal is simple. If you get value, share the episode with one person and go to coachpilot.com/vault to get the tools to put this into action. All right, let's get back to it. So one of the things with that as well that we need to be realistic about, we work a lot with enterprise clients. And particularly in that complex selling environment, you then have to have and I've experienced it in all of the big organizations that I've worked at, but you go in and you have a minimum of 30 different compliance trainings that you have to do. And, you know, generally like speaking, most people try to push through those because and the forgetting curve, we've got to think about that. So you've got onboarding as like, what is absolutely, I completely agree, have a skills matrix, set that sort of up. But then you've got all these other challenges of like, how do you reduce the noise of, you know, making sure that, yes, we absolutely need to make sure that we have our people capable in everything regulatory and compliance related. But then, you know, beyond those trainings, they're then thinking of that as like task, next, complete, do this quiz, next one. Yeah. And then once they're done, there's almost this like a fatigue around that.
Yeah.
And then with that, it's like, okay, will someone be there to then coach me like ongoing? Some organizations have sales enablement, some don't. So then it's like, if you've got that complex sort of thing, and then you have the, you know, support or not, those who don't have support, they're kind of left to their own devices. And then, you know, they kind of have to make it up as they come along.
Yeah. And I think you've just touched on something important, right? There's the compliance training, which in some cases is we need to tick a box.
Yeah.
But the onboarding outside of the, you know, the compliance component, for me, that's a development. So that I would differentiate the two in my onboarding to say there's tasks that need to be completed in order to meet compliance requirements.
And to be able to meet clients even.
But then there's the development plan, which is what you're referring to. It's how do we then, is there a buddy system? Like they're all the things that need to be thought about when you're building an onboarding program.
But then buddy systems as well are only as capable as the buddy.
As the people that they're pairing them up to.
I think that this is where people kind of fall down as well is I don't think there is one core way to onboard. But to me, you also need to then look at, okay, by that 3 month that you think is the onboarded rate or 6 month, how are they performing? Because to replace, say, a rep, it's almost like, well, it's around about $100,000. And then you think about that ramp, you haven't just like HR, recruitment, legal for sign up, like getting them onboarded. All of these invisible costs like add up. And then there is the sales ramp to actually get them not just talking to clients, but then actually delivering against revenue.
And we need to talk about that because obviously that's an important part of an onboarding process is your salesperson's not going to start at 100% ramp time from day one, right? So you need to incorporate that into your onboarding process is to say, when do we think they're going to be at full ramp? And hence, so I think if anyone's listening to this that might not have a very clear onboarding process, the key thing is just to map it out, right? Don't overcomplicate it if you're starting from ground zero. Just map it out. Map it out on a whiteboard. What are the key stages? What are the things that we want our individuals to be doing by the time 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 180 days? And then what's the plan to get them there? And if you've got a comprehensive program in already, look for some of the gaps. Do you have that buddying system that Regan spoke about, right? Are you measuring maybe some of the behaviors against each of the competencies important, right? How are you driving that continual loop of learning for them to get better and better? So I think there's a bit of a maturity here from a onboarding. Some are very mature, some don't have anything. But the key to this is making sure it's mapped out and you're starting to measure performance against your onboarding plan.
One thing, so great points from both of you, right? And I'm going to pull a few threads from what both of you have mentioned. Louis, you mentioned content. Riggs, you mentioned like a bit of a buddy system and how do you maintain good where there's that, a buddy is only as good as the buddy itself. One thing that I didn't have in my previous business that we started was like a bit of a handbook.
Yeah.
Right. As something that you can all reference at any given time. You can ask it questions and it's something that is continually built on as the company grows. Right. And that's something that we've done now. There's only the 3 of us at the moment within Coach Pilot. We've got two or three more hires before the end of the year. And what we now have put together is our company handbook. And the company handbook is the company DNA. So if there's a question on anything, right, that is the first point of call about our vision, the goals that we've got for this year, the product, what can the product do? Because like you mentioned, Riggs, like you're going through the onboarding process, it's just an influx of information for this person.
And forgetting curve, right?
They're going to forget 90% of it, right? So where do they go back? Rather than asking the buddy 1,000 questions and then drawing their time and costing the company more money, the handbook, right? How do you make a decision in the business? Should be set by the values. And how do you understand how to make a decision, the values? Go back to the written handbook. And it's even more important where, we all live in the same state, yet we work remotely. A lot of companies now have got more remote staff. Yeah. So face-to-face time is, at its lowest that it's ever been. So you need some form of information source that you can always reference to.
The challenge to that though as well, and I've been talking to a few large organizations lately and about this sort of topic, and then also just seeing what people coming into my team or people coming into the broader business as well is when you're at that larger end and you have such, the regulatory piece, you've got an L&D team that will be pushing out their stuff. Then you've got the core training of that division or segment of the business. And then you have an overabundance of information as well. So there's either like at that, I completely agree with you, Dave, at parts of wherever you are in your cycle, you should have that information there. And it's a lot easier for those that are building. For us, it's great.
Yeah.
But then for that other side, we almost need to be like, how do we help reduce that noise to be able to facilitate that person, to be able to give them one core place to go rather than look at this playbook over here, go to this CRM, use this tool, access this intranet site, because it can get really overwhelming.
And it gets laborious as well, right? And I think just bringing it back, look, if we're thinking, all that stuff's happening, at the end of the day, our ability to onboard sellers is about helping them understand the requirements to execute the role. So hence things like role playing are important. I think we didn't talk about that. I think it's critical to talk about that. In any good onboarding program should have role playing as part of the content. And you look at Hyperbound, right? Hyperbound, very fast growing platform because they designed tools for sellers to actually role play with an AI based avatar, right? Cold call against it, etc. Very needed in the market, right? Because that's a gap. A lot of times you do a training program, but really we shouldn't be practicing on customers. We should be practicing in a safe environment first. And I think that's a really key part that most onboarding programs miss. Yeah. So I think again, from a sales perspective, we need to be thinking about that. How do they demonstrate competency against the key skills to do the role and measure it? Put that coaching loop in, support them, and that's the continuous loop.
Hey, so I've got a question for you guys because we might as well make this decision now, recorded
Live.
Yes, we are actually. I'm so excited that we're going to be getting these roles and people in very soon. Like, let's make a target. What do you think our onboarding for a sales rep should be?
Day 2.
Day 2?
Closed one, contract signed.
You know who you are. You're listening to that episode. He knows who he is. There's no ramp time on his contract.
Look, generally, like I put in the handbook, I think I put down 10 to 14 days.
10 to 14 days.
And maximum.
How long did it take you to get confident? I still struggle to get you confident in selling.
Mate, sometimes I don't think you are confident.
Well, it's only as good as the buddy, right? So, look, ideally, depending, again, on how, like you said, how advanced the company is, at our stage, I put at least, say, 10 working days before they're boots on the ground.
They know the client.
Know the client inside out and actually doing things. People will be able to consume it. Like that's at the upper end, right? Like when I'm talking like if you're just doing the things and going day by day and through the motions.
Yeah, but that's because we're also breaking the role down into the AE will have top of funnel focus first before doing full cycle. So we've built that in to the plan. Within 90 days, they're doing full cycle.
A great person should be able to be onboarded, get on the tools, understand the business within the first week.
That's unreal that you say that because studies actually show that like it does take a minimum 6 months for anyone,
6 months.
even high performers, and then for leaders, it takes
you're fired.
12 months. See you guys.
Well, if you're interviewing with us, you ain't got 6 months to get on board. I'll tell you that it's 6 days.
But this is a problem across
you are
every
right.
single industry. Like perception, the perception that you have there is the perception that everyone has, and that creates churn, which ends up being a bigger revenue waste for the business than actually being like, you know what?
What are you saying? I'm the problem, Regan.
Yeah,
but you know what? It's actually funny because if you
it's just
think
a concept that
no, Regan's spot on, but this is where the different behaviors, right? Larger mid-market to enterprise, the expectations on new roles is completely different to founder-led, right? We know founder-led, they're under pressure, they're doing 5, 6, 7 roles. They hire someone. They can't give them the time to train them. We see this. We've seen this.
Yeah, it's half-baked.
So many times. Yeah. We built a business of founders not having the infrastructure in place to induct people, right? That's how we've built a very good business.
Being on the other side of it, having like being sold from enterprise and then from startup, unless it's an absolute gun that has founded the business, there is a lot of gaps in that startup seller if they're not experienced. So like completely right. I think there is an evolution here and there has to be a balance.
Yeah.
Look, I guess my sort of interpretation is I expect people to be active and working like really quickly, right? Learning and becoming better. Obviously that's a forever process,
but that's the expectations of, like I said earlier, when you build out your onboarding plan, is say, what do I want them day 5, day 10, day 20, whatever milestone.
What does good look like at those days?
You just need to map that out and then say, well, how am I going to get this person to that point by X date?
Yes.
Right? And I think, especially if you're a smaller business, if you don't do that and you also have competing priorities and you don't give them the time, then what happens is that individual will start to build certain habits, potentially
Completely
bad
agree.
habits.
Yep.
Then you're trying to remanage them. And this is where things go south. So I think that most, I've seen this from larger businesses, great enablement, even smaller businesses, have that mapped. And the maturity of it gets better and better as the business evolves. So just depending on where you're at in the journey, that map is so important. Know your map, understand what are the milestones, what do we expect from them at that point. The big question is, how do we get them to that point?
Yeah.
That's the question you need to answer.
And that's why I think to wrap up on that, first 90 days should essentially be customer first, like listening to customer conversations. Then you can start to understand the sales process, then the product, then you go into role play, and then you can go into independent. Because without that stage and milestone, like, understand the client, understand the sales process, understand the product. Without those milestones, like you will end up just continuing to flounder. But that 90 days, I think, gets someone up like to an actual true ramp.
Look, I think there's a lot there, right? And, to sum up sort of the question, what does a world-class onboarding plan look like? Really depends, but there's a few core critical elements, right? You need to have things well documented.
Yeah.
You need to treat it like a proper project in the business, not an afterthought, because, you're spending probably one of the biggest resources, most costly resources in the business. So they need the intention and care for them to be successful, and you want them to be successful because it costs a lot of money. You spend it about, like, if it takes them 6 months, via the stats, and someone's on 100, 120 grand, whatever it is, there's quite a lot of money there in just ramping up time.
Plus the opportunity costs, the lost opportunities.
The person that's training them. So there's probably another,
all those invisible
right?
costs.
So it's bloody expensive, and you're probably taking one step backwards in the hope of going 2 steps forward, because if you hired a dad, then you start all over again, right? So
We've all been there.
Well, we've all been there when we thought, someone spoke really well in the interview, showed all the great signs, and then all of a sudden, you hire them on, and then the dynamic is a bit different with them and someone else, and you got to get rid of them. Like, whatever. There's 1,000 things that can go wrong with hiring. So it's getting the fundamentals right, from day dot, and actually showing the love and care for this person that's coming on board, and setting some realistic expectations for when you want them to be producing in whatever role that they're in.